Well, women giving birth during the pandemic are having a tough time with restrictions in place. Lockdowns have meant that new mothers in particular are often denied the usual emotional support.
Now, all this has led to a concern over the possible rising numbers in postnatal depression. Well, joining us now is Kelly Wilton, and she is the Principal Midwifery Officer at the Australian College of Midwives. Thank you so much, Kelly, for taking the time to speak with us. There's a lot of confusion as to what is allowed, what is not allowed, who's allowed in the birthing room, particularly in New South Wales during this particular lockdown. If you could just clarify for us the rules around the birthing process. Who's allowed in? Is the mother allowed any family with them during the process?
Look, it is very hard to clarify those rules because they are being made, at a local level, depending on, what's going on in the rates of infection in the local level. But the reports that we are hearing are that women are only allowed to bring one support person into the birth. And then we're hearing additional stories around testing, that person needs to have had a negative test, possibly even the mother needing to have a negative test. And what's most concerning is that if people haven't had a negative test, that they're not readily able to access rapid point of care testing because those tests are being diverted away from maternity areas into other areas of the hospital.
What happens if the mother does test positive?
There are protocols in place. Should a mother test positive, we should be able to, with all our training and knowledge, midwives and health staff should be able to accommodate for, a woman who tests positive. If she's very unwell, there are, access to caesarean section or other methods, to be out if the baby is compromised. But really, we have a lot of evidence from working with women overseas who are infected with COVID during their birthing process. And that should guide us to be able to work safely, to be able to provide women-centred care for those women.
What about after the birthing? I mean, the birthing process is one thing, and you do need support and family support in particular, or partner support with you at that time. But what about afterwards? Who's allowed in the room with mum and bub?
So what we're hearing is that immediately after the birth, the partner or the support person who has been with the woman has been allowed to stay. We've been hearing varying reports from between an hour to 4 hours. But then as the woman is moved to the postnatal ward, if she's choosing to stay in hospital, quite often that is where we are seeing women and their support people separated. That becomes particularly problematic if the woman has had a caesarean section or perhaps requiring more complex care, so she's navigating that on her own. And especially more so worrying if the baby's requiring a neonatal or special care admission. Quite often then the babies are only allowed to have one visitor, and that visitor is quite often the woman. And if the woman's immobilised for a period of time, that baby's remaining unsupported in a nursery with a partner or a support person at home and a woman in a postnatal ward. So everybody completely separated.
All right. It must be very traumatic, though, particularly for new mums and particularly if they've had a complicated birthing process as well. So what kind of support is being given to, women in those sort of situations?
I think that it varies from health network to health network. Midwives are particularly stretched at the moment. Workforce has never been under more pressure than they are now, working long hours under very trying circumstances. And so what we're seeing and hearing in the community is very limited postnatal support. The hospitals are providing phone consultations. In some cases where women have had complex births, they may be able to access face-to-face consultations with a midwife or other health provider. But generally, we're seeing women left quite unsupported at home.
Yes, that must be quite worrying and quite concerning as well, and particularly for new parents as well. What kind of support is being provided for them? Because as I understand it, the usual support groups have been cancelled. Is there someone they can call?
So there are many, hotlines that women can call if they require support sort of immediately. What we're seeing is that women are generally organising their own ad hoc support, and that may take the form of, virtual parenting groups or new parenting groups, and they're accessing those. and that way able to get that, virtual real-time assistance from other parents who are in the same situation as them across Australia. What's more worrying is that studies out of the UK have shown that postnatal depression has almost doubled, and that leaves a real burden on our health cost. And it is quite worrying that we may be seeing a scenario further on down the line when our pandemic mothers are having increased rates of postnatal depression.
Kelly, talk to us about the sort of impact that this might actually have on the newborn, particularly if the mother is suffering from postnatal depression or new parents are just not settled or comfortable.
What's really important, during the newborn period is that, the family unit and the mother and baby are able to really form that bond, establish breastfeeding. And what we know is that that bond is particularly important in developing those neural pathways for future growth and development and for, children to flourish. When we're seeing women who have and men who have postnatal depression, we're seeing later on down the track those children maybe not having developed as much resilience as babies who weren't exposed to postnatal depression. And those babies, as they grow up, may also be more predisposed to anxiety and depression themselves.
Kelly, the Pfizer vaccine has just been approved as the preferred vaccine for pregnant women. Are you seeing a lot more pregnant women take up this vaccine offer, and do they have any concerns?
Women definitely do have concerns. There are a cohort of women who will go out and rush out to try and get immunised as fast as they can. But we do have a large number of women who either won't have the vaccine or are undecided about having the vaccine. And that generally comes down to they don't understand the vaccine. They haven't had it explained to them by a healthcare provider what the risks and benefits of having a vaccine versus not having a vaccine are. And so I think it'll take a little bit of time to get that message out there. It has only been, just over a few weeks. It was in June that ATAGI and RANSCOG made the recommendation, and only a couple of weeks ago, maybe even a week ago, that the recommendation actually came down that, yes, it is now available. When we look at evidence from the US, which now we have over 130,000 women who have been immunised in the US, and we're able to demonstrate that it is a safe vaccine and that it is decreasing instances of ICU admission, ventilation, and other adverse outcomes associated with COVID-19.
Kelly, it's great getting your insight on this issue. I think you've cleared up a lot of concerns and a lot of confusion around this issue. Thank you so much for being with us on Weekend Breakfast. Kelly Wilton there from the Australian College of Midwives.